I think it's already quite clear that the Americans, the Trump administration, has already flinched. It's not just once, it's multiple times. And essentially, we had the TikTok ban, which I find amusing because it has literally been passed into law, supported by the Supreme Court. And because no deal was able to be made, what happened? Trump decided, well, let's keep kicking that can down the road until we can get a deal. Then we had the Apple carve out because, well, we want to make sure that there's, tariffs on exports out of China, but not everything. Then we had, I think, earlier this week, the supposed $1.5 million fees that were going to be put on container ships coming out of China. That's been reduced significantly. And all of this is being both telegraphed quite loudly and quite openly. And the decision makers in Beijing are just sitting back, watching and waiting until they can get more clarity. And all they're getting instead of clarity is the clear signaling that the United States just doesn't have a position of power to go into these negotiations, at least at this point in time.
Both the U.S. and China are busy, of course, rallying various countries to come up with trade deals. We are looking at President Xi Jinping having gone across ASEAN, Vietnam, Cambodia, as well as Malaysia to make their trade deals. But now also reminding countries to, don't succumb to U.S. pressure. What's going to come of this? How are we going to see things realign given where it's at right now?
Well, I think that's sort of one half of the issue, because the other side of it was, Trump coming out and saying, very reminiscent, I would say, of George W. Bush 25 years ago, you're either with us or the terrorists. The argument being that Trump is now coming out saying, you're going to have to choose Europe, you're going to have to choose Japan. Are you with us or are you with China? And I think if you look over the course of the last 25 years, China has been very intelligent in their diplomatic approach, where it has been clear where engagement with other third parties, whether it's within the region or in Europe, the Chinese leadership has said, look, it's okay. You can prioritize your relationship with the United States, but that does not mean that we, China, are the enemy. It's not this duality, if you will. So I think China's response of saying, be mindful or you shouldn't succumb to a pressure of the American government to do a deal that is both against that individual country's intents, but also something that would go against China. Because as we all know, right, if you look at trading partners globally, China now represents the largest trading partner for far more countries than the United States does at this point.
We're watching Trump as he has escalated his attacks on Jerome Powell and the impact on the U.S. dollar. Does this kind of benefit the yuan, and can China use this as a moment to further boost yuan internationalization as we watch a de-dollarization?
Okay, and this is super important, and Emily, I appreciate the question, because the U.S. dollar plays two roles. It is the international reserve currency and the reserve asset. And anybody, I believe, that expects the U.S. dollar to be, pushed out by the renminbi of all things as the reserve currency, I just don't see that happening. I think trade will continue to be facilitated by the U.S. dollar. The real question, though, is where will those surpluses, if you have savings or you do more trade and then you have a surplus, you're not going to put it in the reserve asset, which is the U.S. Treasury anymore. This is one of the reasons I believe that gold has been on such a tear over the last several months. That is where I think China is trying to have more of an impact. I would encourage everybody out there to go look at the Shanghai Gold Exchange. They have made tremendous leaps in opening up to allow for settlement and physical delivery. So if you're a country that trades with China, you have a surplus in renminbi, you can use that to then buy gold at the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and then you can physically deliver it to wherever you wish. That is the area that China is going to, I think, be more aggressive. In terms of facilitating trade, sure, the renminbi would be great, but the dollar, it's still the monster, the elephant, I should say, in the room.